The old clock on the wall ticked slowly, almost mockingly, as Jamal Richardson sat in his patrol car, gripping the steering wheel tighter than he should. Another night, another shift, but something felt different. There was a tension in the air, a weight pressing down on his chest. He had seen too much, endured too much, and tonight he was tired of biting his tongue. Jamal had been with the department for 8 years. He was good at his job, damn good, but that didn't seem to matter to certain people in his precinct. Officers like Carter and Reynolds, 2 men who walked around the station like they owned it, never let him forget that he wasn't one of them. He was tolerated, not respected. Over the years, he had seen the way they handled certain calls, how they treated people who looked like him. He had seen the smug grins, the exchanged glances, the unnecessary force. But tonight was different. The radio crackled. Suspicious activity reported at 144 Maplewood. Possible burglary in progress. Jamal pressed a button. Unit 17 responding. But before he could pull out, another voice cut in. Negative, Unit 17. Unit 24 will handle. Unit 24. Carter and Reynolds. Jamal clenched his jaw. He knew what that meant. A so-called suspicious person in a predominantly white neighborhood? This wasn't going to end well. His gut twisted. He hesitated, then reached for his phone and quickly tapped out a message. If what he suspected was about to happen, someone had to know. He turned his car in the opposite direction of Maplewood. But he wasn't going home. No, he had somewhere else to be. Meanwhile, Carter and Reynolds arrived at the scene. A young black man, no older than 19, was standing outside a small, well-kept house, fumbling with keys. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if he sensed danger. He didn't see them until the bright red and blue lights bathed the street in flashing colors. The officers stepped out slowly, hands resting on their holsters. "Got ID, son?" Carter asked, his voice dripping with condescension. The young man, Jason, swallowed hard. "Why, yeah, it's in my pocket." "Slowly," Reynolds barked. "Don't make any sudden moves." Jason's hands trembled as he reached into his jacket. He pulled out his wallet, but before he could hand it over, Reynolds grabbed his arm and yanked him forward. "What's the rush?" Carter sneered. "Got something to hide?" Jason's voice cracked. "No, sir, this is my house. My mom, she just bought it last month. We just moved in." "Your house?" Reynolds scoffed. "Funny, because we got a call about a burglar." Jason's eyes darted around. "Who called?" "This is my house. My mom's name is Maria Thompson. Look it up. We live here." But Carter wasn't listening. Hands on the car. "Now!" Jason froze. "Please, just call my mom. She's inside." That's when Reynolds shoved him hard. Jason stumbled, his head hitting the hood of the police cruiser with a sickening thud. He groaned, his hands flying up to shield himself. "Resisting, huh?" Carter muttered, yanking Jason's arms behind his back. "Should have known." Jason struggled, panic setting in. No, please, I'm not." "Shut up," Reynolds hissed, tightening the cuffs. The sound of a car screeching to a stop made both officers look up. Another police vehicle. But this wasn't backup. The man stepping out of the car wasn't just another officer. It was Police Chief Harold Whitmore. A chill ran down Carter's spine. "Chief? What are you?" "Let him go." Whitmore's voice was low, controlled, but there was a razor-sharp edge to it. Carter hesitated. "Sir, we were responding to a—" "I said let him go." Reynolds stepped back immediately. Hands up. Carter released Jason, who stumbled, his breath coming in short, panic gasps. The chief turned to Jason. "Are you hurt, son?" Jason nodded shakily, rubbing his wrist where the cuffs had dug into his skin. Whitmore's eyes darkened as he turned back to his officers. "Explain." Carter tried to straighten his posture. "Sir, we received a call about a burglary in progress. This individual was acting suspiciously." "This individual lives here," Whitmore interrupted. He took a slow step forward, his towering presence making Carter and Reynolds shrink slightly. "And I know that because I received a message from Officer Richardson." Carter and Reynolds exchanged quick glances. Their faces paled. Whitmore continued, his voice now ice cold. You two think I don't know what's been going on? You think I haven't been watching? The reports, the complaints, the incidents that always seem to involve young black men. Sir, I checked the call logs. No one in this neighborhood called about a burglary. Whitmore's voice dropped, dangerously low. So, tell me, why were you here? Silence. Whitmore took another step forward. I have the footage. Richardson sent it to me. Body cam footage. Dash cam footage. Everything. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Do you know what that means? Carter swallowed hard. Reynolds shifted uneasily. It means you're done. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Whitmore pulled out his radio. Internal Affairs. This is Chief Whitmore. I need immediate personnel to 144 Maplewood for an on-site investigation. 2 officers are to be placed on administrative leave pending review. Carter's face twisted. Sir, please. Whitmore cut him off with a glare so fierce that Carter's mouth snapped shut. Reynolds, usually smug and full of himself, looked like he might throw up. Jason, still shaken, looked at Whitmore with wide eyes. Thank you, sir. Aye. Whitmore nodded. Go inside, son. You're safe now. As Jason hurried toward the door, the 2 disgraced officers stood frozen, watching as their careers, no, their entire lives, crumbled before their eyes. And just like that, the power had shifted. They had always been the ones to make people feel small. But now, standing under the unrelenting gaze of their chief, they knew what it felt like to be powerless. They just didn't know that this was only the beginning. Carter's hands trembled as he exchanged a desperate glance with Reynolds. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to be untouchable. They had controlled this precinct for years, bending the rules, knowing no one would dare question them. But now, the chief had them backed into a corner, and they could feel the walls closing in. Whitmore took another step forward, his eyes cold and unyielding. You're lucky I'm not slapping cuffs on you myself. But believe me, that's not off the table. Reynolds swallowed hard. Sir, we were just doing our jobs. Doing your jobs? Whitmore scoffed. Is that what you call it? His voice turned sharp. This department is supposed to serve and protect. But what you 2 did tonight, that wasn't service. That wasn't protection. That was a violation of everything this badge stands for. Carter gritted his teeth. We didn't mean... You mean to what? Get caught. Whitmore's voice was venomous. You've been playing this game for too long, thinking no one was watching. But I've been watching. And now, it's time for consequences. The silence that followed was suffocating. The flashing red and blue lights painted eerie shadows across their faces, making their fear almost palpable. A car door slammed behind them, and Jamal Richardson stepped out, his gaze locked onto Carter and Reynolds. Jamal had waited years for this moment, years of biting his tongue, years of watching these men abuse their authority, manipulate situations, and walk away untouched. But now, justice was finally catching up with them. He folded his arms. Didn't think you'd get caught, did you? Carter's jaw twitched. You set us up. Jamal chuckled dryly. No, Carter, you set yourself up. I just made sure the right people saw it. Reynolds' nostrils flared. You think you're some kind of hero? Jamal's face darkened. I think I'm someone who finally got tired of watching you get away with it. Whitmore turned to his radio. Internal Affairs, what's your ETA? A voice crackled back. 2 minutes out, Chief. The chief nodded before facing Carter and Reynolds one last time. This is bigger than just a night. There will be a full investigation. Every report, every complaint, every questionable arrest you've made. I want it all dug up, and if we find more. He let the question hang ominously. Then you'll be facing more than just losing your badges. Carter's face turned a sickly shade of white. Reynolds, for the first time in his career, looked genuinely afraid. Just then, the front door of Jason's house creaked open, and a woman in her late 40s stepped out, her face full of worry. Maria Thompson, Jason's mother. She hurried toward her son, wrapping her arms around him protectively. Jason, are you all right? Jason nodded, but his eyes were still filled with lingering fear. They thought I was a burglar, Mom, right in front of our own house. Maria's expression darkened as she turned toward Whitmore. Chief, I want to press charges. Carter and Reynolds tensed. Whitmore didn't hesitate. I'll make sure the necessary steps are taken, Miss Thompson. Before anyone could say another word, another police car pulled up, and 2 internal affairs officers stepped out, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a tall man in a gray suit, approached Whitmore. Chief, we'll take it from here. Whitmore nodded. Make sure they get what they deserve. Carter and Reynolds were led to the side, where the IA officers began questioning them, but Jamal wasn't watching them anymore. His attention was on Jason, who still looked shaken. Jamal stepped forward. Hey, man, you okay? Jason exhaled slowly. I don't know. I never thought something like this would happen to me. Jamal nodded. I know the feeling. Jason looked up at him, eyes full of uncertainty. Does it ever get better? Jamal wished he had a simple answer. It gets easier when people stop staying silent. When we stand up. Whitmore turned back to them. We're making changes. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Jason and Maria exchanged a look before nodding. I hope so, Chief, Maria said, because I won't let this slide. Just then, one of the IA officers pulled Whitmore aside and whispered something in his ear. The chief's face hardened. Jamal noticed. What is it? Whitmore took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists. It's worse than I thought. There's more. A lot more. Carter and Reynolds weren't just bad cops. They were at the center of something bigger, something sinister. And now, the real investigation was about to begin. Jamal's stomach twisted. If what Whitmore was saying was true, tonight wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Jamal's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean, Chief? What else did they find? Whitmore's face was stone cold as he turned to the internal affairs officer. The man in the gray suit stepped forward, his voice measured but firm. During the preliminary review of Officers Carter and Reynolds' records, we discovered a pattern, multiple reports of excessive force, evidence tampering, and he hesitated before looking directly at Whitmore, a possible cover-up involving a missing person case. Jamal felt his stomach drop. A missing person case? The IA officer nodded grimly. A young black man, Devon Mitchell, went missing 6 months ago. His last known interaction was with Officers Carter and Reynolds. The official report said they let him go after a routine stop, but new evidence suggests that wasn't the case. Maria Thompson gasped, clutching Jason tighter. Oh my God, his poor family. Whitmore's hands tightened into fists. Why am I just hearing about this now? Because someone buried the evidence. The IA officer's voice was like ice. But we're digging it back up. Jamal exhaled sharply. You think Carter and Reynolds had something to do with his disappearance? Whitmore exchanged a glance with the IA officer before nodding. It's looking that way. And if that's true, then this goes beyond misconduct. We're talking about a possible homicide. A heavy silence fell over the group. The flashing police lights painted the night in an eerie glow, but nothing could overshadow the darkness of what they had just uncovered. Reynolds, who had been standing stiffly near the IA car, suddenly broke his silence. This is a setup. His voice wavered, but his bravado remained. You don't have any proof. Carter, however, remained silent, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like he might shatter his teeth. The IA officer didn't even flinch. We will. Just then, one of the other IA investigators approached, a laptop in hand. Chief, we accessed some body cam footage from that night. The footage that was supposed to be deleted. Jamal's heart pounded. And the investigator's expression was grave. You need to see this. Whitmore took the laptop and pressed play. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Carter and Reynolds pulling over Devon Mitchell. The timestamp was 1:47 a.m., 6 months ago. In the footage, Devon looked nervous but compliant. What's the problem, officers? Carter's voice came through the speakers, sharp and mocking. You tell us. You looked real suspicious back there. Devon shifted. I was just walking home. Reynolds circled him like a predator. Yeah, you got ID. Devon reached into his pocket, but before he could pull anything out, the video glitched. When it resumed, Devon was no longer standing. He was on the ground. Blood pooled beneath him. Carter and Reynolds stood over him, exchanging hushed words. Then, the unthinkable happened. The footage cut to black. A collective gasp filled the air. Jamal felt like he was going to be sick. They heard him. Maria covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Jason stood frozen, unable to process what he had just seen. Whitmore's face darkened. He turned to Carter and Reynolds, his voice like thunder. Where is he? Reynolds shook his head, his mask of arrogance starting to crack. I don't. Where is he? Whitmore roared, stepping forward so fast that Reynolds flinched. Carter finally spoke, his voice low and shaking. You don't know what you're getting into, Chief. Whitmore narrowed his eyes. That sounds like a threat. Carter looked away. It's a warning. A shiver ran down Jamal's spine. Something was off. Carter wasn't just being defiant. He was afraid. But of what? The IA officer turned to Whitmore. Chief, we need to take them in. Now. Whitmore didn't hesitate. Take them. Within moments, Carter and Reynolds were in cuffs. As the IA officers led them toward their car, Carter turned back, his face pale. You think this ends with us? He let out a bitter laugh. You have no idea what you just started. Jamal frowned. What's that supposed to mean? But Carter just shook his head and got into the car. As the IA vehicle pulled away, a strange feeling settled over the scene. The night was supposed to feel victorious. Justice was supposed to be served. But instead, something far more sinister was unraveling. Whitmore turned to Jamal. We need to dig deeper. Jamal nodded. I'm in. But as he looked back down at the darkened street, a single thought gnawed at him. If Carter was afraid, then what exactly were they up against? And just how deep did this corruption go? Jamal could barely sleep that night. Carter's last words echoed in his mind. You have no idea what you've just started. What did he mean? If Carter and Reynolds were afraid, that meant there was someone or something bigger than them pulling the strings. And that meant the fight wasn't over. The next morning, Whitmore called an emergency meeting at the precinct. Internal Affairs had launched a full-scale investigation, digging through years of records, complaints, and deleted footage. But what they found next sent a shockwave through the department. A secret file, buried deep in the system. Jamal sat across from Whitmore in his office as the chief scrolled through the data on his computer. His face darkened with every passing second. This is bigger than we thought, Whitmore muttered. There's a network of officers covering for each other. Fake reports, missing evidence, altered statements. It wasn't just Carter and Reynolds. It's a whole system designed to protect bad cops. Jamal clenched his fists. How do we stop it? Whitmore's jaw tightened. By exposing every last one of them. Just then, an officer burst into the office, his face pale. Chief, you need to see this. Whitmore and Jamal followed him to the main lobby, where a TV was broadcasting breaking news. The screen showed a live press conference, featuring none other than Carter's lawyer. A stern-looking man in a suit stood at a podium, speaking into a cluster of microphones. My client, Officer Carter, is a decorated officer with years of service. These allegations against him are nothing more than a political attack. And let me be clear, he will not go down alone. If Carter is going down, he's taking others with him. Jamal's stomach twisted. They're trying to flip this. Whitmore's face remained unreadable. Let them try. Within the hour, a response was made. The city's mayor, furious over the scandal, announced a full-scale corruption probe. The public was outraged. People took to the streets, demanding justice for Devon Mitchell and every other victim of police misconduct. The pressure mounted. And then, the final blow came. The missing body. Internal Affairs located a witness, an ex-cop who had left the force in fear. He came forward with chilling testimony. Devon Mitchell's body had been moved, hidden, buried in an abandoned construction site just outside the city. A search team was immediately dispatched. Hours later, they found him. The news spread like wildfire. Carter and Reynolds were now facing murder charges. Their so-called allies began turning on each other, cutting deals to save themselves. One by one, corrupt officers were exposed. Arrests were made. Careers were ended. And finally, justice was served. Jamal stood outside the courthouse, watching as Carter and Reynolds were led away in shackles. The once powerful officers who had terrorized so many now looked small, defeated. Whitmore stood beside him. "We did it." Jamal nodded. "Yeah, but there's still more work to do." Whitmore gave him a knowing look. "You ever think about joining the force?" Jamal chuckled. "One step at a time, Chief." As the crowd around them cheered, the message was clear. Corruption would no longer be tolerated. And for the first time in a long time, people believed in justice again. And that, my friends, is how the police chief caught racist officers in the act. And their careers ended instantly. If you were moved by this story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Let us know your thoughts below. Justice must be served, and every voice matters.